The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and warm sugar, the kind of scent that wraps you up like a quilt on a chilly fall evening. In my little house in Asheville, North Carolina, the late October light poured through the big window over the sink, painting the oak table in shades of gold. I just pulled a tray of oatmeal cookies from the oven, their edges crisp and perfect, the way my granddaughter Emma liked them. I was arranging them on a plate, humming an old hymn, when the front door swung open. Tessa strode in, her high heels clicking on the hardwood like a metronome. She was all sharp angles in her tailored blazer, her phone pressed to her ear, barking orders about some marketing campaign. When she saw the cookies, she stopped mid-sentence, her lips curling into a smirk. "Mom, really?" she said, not even bothering to hang up. "Don't make that old-fashioned junk anymore. Emma needs healthy snacks, not some grandma's recipe." The words hit me like a slap. My hands trembled as I set the tray down, the metal clinking against the counter. I wanted to say something but my throat tightened, and all I could do was stare at the cookies, their warmth mocking me. In that moment, the sunlight in my kitchen felt like it had been snuffed out, leaving nothing but shadows. I'm Margaret, 65 years old, and I've spent my life pouring love into this home. But standing there, I wondered, had all my sacrifices been reduced to this? Just an old woman, invisible in her own kitchen? I've always believed a kitchen is the heart of a home. Back when I was raising my son James, alone after my husband passed, this very room was our sanctuary. I was a third-grade teacher then, up before dawn to grade papers, pack lunches, and get James to school. But every evening, we'd sit at this table, him with his crayons, me with a cup of tea, and we'd talk. I taught him to roll out cookie dough right here, his little hands sticky with flour, his laugh brighter than any sunset. Those were the days when the world felt whole, when I thought love could fix anything. Now this house belongs to James and Tessa, though I still live here, tucked into a corner of their lives. Emma, their 12-year-old daughter, is the only one who makes me feel like I belong. But Tessa? She's made it clear I'm a relic, a dusty antique in her sleek, modern world. I try to keep the peace for Emma's sake, for James's, but each day, I feel a little more like a rose in a garden nobody tends, wilting under Tessa's cold gaze. The real trouble came a week later, at Emma's 12th birthday party. I'd spent days planning it, wanting to give her something special. The backyard was strung with fairy lights, the air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves. I'd made a spread of comfort food, mac and cheese, cornbread, and a chocolate cake with Emma's name in loopy icing. Neighbors and friends filled the house, their chatter mingling with soft music from the radio. Tessa, though, had other ideas. She'd ordered a tray of sushi and some fancy kale salad from a downtown caterer, her contribution to the party. When it was time to eat, she stood up, her wine glass in hand, and addressed the crowd. "Everyone, help yourselves to the real food," she said, gesturing to her trays. "Don't bother with Margaret's stuff, it's a bit rustic for most tastes." The room went quiet. Faces turned toward me, eyes wide with awkward sympathy. Emma, sitting beside me, clutched her napkin, her cheeks flushing. I felt my heart stutter, not from anger but from a deep, aching hurt. My food, me love, poured into every dish was being tossed aside like scraps. I looked at James, hoping he'd say something, anything, but he just stared at his plate, his jaw tight, as if silence could make it all disappear. "Tessa," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I just wanted Emma to have a warm homemade party, like I used to make for James." Tessa laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. "Oh, Margaret, come on, times have changed. James married me because I'm forward-thinking, not stuck in the past, like—" She stopped, but the word hung in the air. "You." Emma pushed her chair back and ran upstairs, the thud of her footsteps echoing in the silence. The guests murmured, picking at their food, while Tessa sipped her wine, unfazed. I wanted to scream, to tell her she had no right to trample my heart like that. But I didn't. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, feeling like the sunlight had shattered into 1,000 pieces. Later that night, after the guests had gone, and Tessa was upstairs scrolling on her phone, I sat alone in the kitchen. The fairy lights outside swayed in the breeze, casting flickers of light across the table. I thought of a long-ago evening, when James was Emma's age. We'd baked cookies together, just the two of us, and he'd hugged me, saying, Mom, you're the best. That memory was a lifeline, a reminder of who I'd been before I became Margaret, the old lady in the way. Jin, I touched the edge of the table, tracing the nicks and scratches from years of love. Tessa's words echoed in my mind, old-fashioned, rustic, stuck in the past. But I wasn't just some faded photograph. I'd raised a son, built a home, survived a broken heart. I wasn't done yet. I'm not invisible, I whispered to the empty room. And I'm going to make sure Tessa sees that. If you've ever felt overlooked in your own home, like your love was taken for granted, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. And if you're rooting for me to find my sunlight again, hit that subscribe button to follow along. Will I stand up to Tessa? Will my kitchen glow once more? Subscribe now to find out. The morning after Emma's birthday party, I woke to the quiet of the house, the kind of stillness that feels heavier than silence. Outside, Asheville's mountains were draped in mist, and the garden's last roses drooped under the weight of dew. I stood at the kitchen counter, brewing coffee, trying to shake the memory of Tessa's words. Rustic, stuck in the past. They clung to me like damp leaves, cold and unyielding. I'd always thought love was enough to hold a family together. But now, staring at the empty table, I wondered if I'd been wrong all along. I carried my mug to the window, watching a cardinal flit through the rose bushes. This kitchen, with its chipped blue mugs and worn dish towels, held every piece of my heart. But lately, it felt like a museum, my life on display for Tessa to judge. I wasn't just Margaret anymore, I was the old lady, a shadow in my own home. How had it come to this? I'd given everything to my son, James, and now to Emma. Yet here I was, 65, feeling like a rose left too long on the vine, fading with no one to notice. Back in the 80s, this house was my fortress. I was 30, a widowed teacher raising James alone in Asheville's tight-knit community. Money was scarce me. Teaching salary barely covered the mortgage, but I made it work. Days were a blur of lesson plans and parent conferences, but nights belonged to us. I'd cook simple suppers, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and we'd eat at this same oak table, James chattering about school or his latest comic book. One winter, when James was 9, he caught pneumonia. I can still see him, pale and shivering, his breath rasping like wind through dry leaves. I stayed up 3 nights straight, sponging his forehead, whispering prayers between sips of cold coffee. The hospital bills piled up, but I didn't care. I'd have sold this house, my mother's ring, anything to keep him safe. In the kitchen, I'd bake his favorite oatmeal cookies, hoping the smell would coax him to eat. When he finally smiled, weak but real, I felt like I'd won a war. "You're my hero, Mom," he said. That moment lived in me, a spark that never faded. Now, stirring sugar into my coffee, I wondered what that young Margaret would think of me. I'd fought so hard for James, but somewhere along the way, I'd let Tessa strip me bare. She didn't see the woman who'd rebuilt a life from ashes. To her, I was just old. I set my mug down, the clink loud in the quiet. I didn't regret my sacrifices, but the ache in my chest wasn't just from age. It was the weight of being forgotten. Tessa's campaign to erase me grew bolder in the weeks that followed. One evening, she called a family meeting in the living room, her laptop open to a spreadsheet. James sat beside her, his eyes fixed on the floor, while Emma curled up on the couch, clutching a book. I stood in the doorway, feeling like an uninvited guest. "Margaret," Tessa began, her voice clipped, "we're redecorating. This house needs a modern vibe, open concept, clean lines. Your stuff is cluttering things up." She gestured vaguely, as if my entire life were a pile of junk. "And your room? It's prime real estate. We need it for guests. You'd be fine in the attic, right? It's cozy up there." My breath caught. The attic was a dusty crawl space, barely fit for storage. I glanced at James, waiting for him to speak. He shifted, clearing his throat. "Mom, Tessa's just trying to make the house work for everyone," he mumbled. "Work for everyone?" I said, my voice softer than I felt. "James, this is the home I built for you. I just want to be near Emma, to be part of this family." Tessa rolled her eyes. "Margaret, let's be real. You're not the lady of the house anymore. I am. Times change, and you need to keep up." Emma's book slipped to the floor with a thud. "I like Grandma's room where it is," she said, her voice small but firm. Tessa shot her a look, and Emma shrank back. James said nothing. his silence louder than any words. I walked back to the kitchen, my hands shaking. The roses outside seemed to wilt in sympathy. James, my boy, had chosen Tessa's Sidior, at least her silence over me. I'd lost him, not to distance or time, but to her. The pain wasn't just in my heart, it was in my bones, a deep, grinding ache. I thought of my husband's grave, the promises I'd made to keep our family whole. Had I failed him too? The breaking point came a week later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was dusting the mantel, where I kept a few treasures. A photo of James's first day of school, my mother's teacup, and a porcelain rose vase my husband gave me on our 10th anniversary. Its delicate petals caught the light, a reminder of love that endured. Tessa was in the living room, scrolling on her phone, when Emma ran in, chasing the cat. The vase wobbled, and before I could reach it, Tessa's elbow knocked it to the floor. It shattered, shards scattering like broken promises. "Oh, oops," Tessa said, barely glancing up. "That old thing? Good riddance. It was an eyesore." I froze, my breath hitching. That vase wasn't just glass, it was a piece of my heart, a tether to the man I'd lost. I knelt, gathering the fragments, my fingers trembling. Tessa's laugh cut through me. "Margaret, don't be dramatic, it's just junk." Something snapped inside me. I stood, the shards in my hands, and looked her in the eye. "Tessa," I said, my voice low but steady, "you don't get to decide what matters to me. Not anymore." She blinked, caught off guard, but recovered quickly. "Whatever, Margaret, get over it." She walked away, her heels clicking, leaving me with the broken pieces. That night, I called my sister Linda, who lived across town. She'd always been my anchor, the one who understood me without words. "Lynn," I said, my voice cracking, "I can't do this anymore. I'm not a ghost in my own house. I'm done letting Tessa walk over me." Linda's voice was warm, like a hug through the phone. "Maggie, you're stronger than you know. You raised James alone, kept this family together. Tessa's no match for you. What's your plan?" I looked at the kitchen, the table where I'd fought my battles. "I'm going to remind her who I am," I said. Not with anger, but with the kind of strength she can't ignore. I sat up late, the house asleep around me. The roses outside glowed faintly under the moon, their petals fragile but defiant. I wasn't ready to give up, not on this home, not on Emma, not on myself. Tessa thought she could push me into the shadows, but she was wrong. This kitchen, this life, was mine, and I'd make it shine again. I didn't know how yet, but the spark was there, like the first ray of dawn after a long night. What do you think I'll do to take back my light? Drop your guesses in the comments below, and if you're cheering for me to show Tessa what I'm made of, hit that subscribe button. Will Tessa finally see me, or will she push me further into the dark? Subscribe now to find out. The November air in Asheville carried a crisp promise, like the world was holding its breath for something new. I stood in my kitchen, rolling out dough for cornbread, the familiar rhythm grounding me. The roses outside the window had shed their last petals, but their bare branches stood tall, waiting for spring. I decided it was time to stop waiting for Tessa's approval, for James's defense, for a place in my own home. Tonight, I'd take back my light, not with anger, but with the quiet strength of a woman who'd survived a lifetime of storms. I'd spent days planning a community supper, the kind Asheville folks loved, where neighbors gathered over homemade food and stories. I invited old friends, colleagues from my teaching days, and the families down the street. The backyard was ready with picnic tables, lanterns glowing like fireflies, and a playlist of folk tunes humming from a speaker. This wasn't just a meal, it was my way of saying, I'm still here, and I matter. As the first guests arrived, their laughter filled the house, mingling with the scent of roasted chicken and apple pie. I moved between the kitchen and the yard, refilling glasses, swapping stories, feeling like the Margaret I'd almost forgotten. Emma trailed me, her eyes bright, helping carry plates. Tessa, though, hovered on the porch, her arms crossed, her face a mix of boredom and disdain. "This is so quaint," she muttered to James, loud enough for me to hear. "Who has time for this stuff?" I smiled, not at her, but at the warmth around me. Let her scoff. Tonight wasn't about her. The turning point came when Mrs. Larson, my old principal, stood to make a toast. Her white hair gleamed under the lanterns as she raised her glass. To Margaret, she said, her voice clear. This woman taught half the kids in Asheville to read, raised a fine son, and still makes the best cornbread I've ever tasted. You're a treasure, Maggie. The crowd clapped, some wiping tears. Emma beamed, squeezing my hand. I looked at Tessa, expecting her usual smirk, but she was staring at her plate, her fingers tight around her fork. For the first time, she looked small. James shifted beside her, his eyes meeting mine, filled with something like regret. Later, as folks dug into dessert, a neighbor, Tom, pulled me aside. Maggie, your oatmeal cookies take me back to my mom's kitchen. Don't ever stop being you. His words were a balm, stitching up wounds I hadn't named. I glanced at Tessa, who was watching, her face unreadable. Tessa, I said, walking over, my voice calm but firm. I don't need your approval. I just need to be me. She opened her mouth, then closed it, nodding slightly. It wasn't surrender, but it was a crack in her armor. James touched her arm, whispering something, and she looked away. For the first time, I felt the sunlight creeping back, not because of them, but because I'd chosen myself. Tessa's unraveling came a week later, quiet and unexpected. I was in the garden, pruning the rose bushes, when Emma ran out, her face pale. Grandma, Mom's crying in her room. She lost a big work deal, and she's different. I set down my shears, my heart torn. Part of me wanted to let Tessa stew she'd built her own cage, but Emma's worry pulled me inside. Upstairs, Tessa sat on the bed, her mascara smudged, papers scattered around her. It's all falling apart, she mumbled, not looking at me. The client dropped me, said I'm too cold. She laughed, bitter. Maybe they're right. I sat beside her, the mattress creaking under my weight. Tessa, I said softly, you're not cold, you're just lost. But you don't have to stay that way. She shook her head. You don't get it, Margaret. I thought I had to be perfect, better than everyone, better than you. But Emma told me about you, how you worked 2 jobs when James was sick, how you never gave up. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Her voice broke and she covered her face. I took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling. I'd waited for this, dreamed of it, but now it was here. I felt no triumph, only peace. Tessa, I said, I forgive you, but you need to learn to value people, not just things. She nodded, tears falling. Can you teach me to be like you? I smiled, thinking of the kitchen, the heart of this home. We'll start with cookies, I said, tomorrow. By late November, the kitchen was alive again. One Sunday morning, Tessa and I stood side by side, flour dusting our aprons, as we shaped oatmeal cookies. Emma perched on a stool, giggling as she sneaked dough. The sunlight streamed through the window, warm and golden, like a promise kept. James walked in, pausing at the sight. Smells like my childhood, he said, his voice thick. He hugged me, a real hug, the kind I hadn't felt in years. Later, I gave Tessa a small clay pot with a rose cutting, its roots just beginning. Care for it, I said, like you're learning to care for yourself. She took it, her eyes soft, and nodded. As I watched them, Emma licking a spoon, Tessa laughing, James setting the table, I thought of the roses outside, bare but enduring. Life, I realized, wasn't about being seen by others. It was about knowing your own worth, even when the world looks away. At 65, I'd found my sunlight, not in Tessa's apology or James's regret, but in the quiet strength of being me. And if I could bloom again, anyone could. Has my journey touched your heart? What did you learn from my search for sunlight? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're inspired to find your own light, subscribe to catch more stories like this. Hit that button now, and let's keep spreading love together.